Here's to family, and to truth, because the truth has a way of setting the right people free. I raised my glass, smiling at my wife Liana, as the crowd of elegantly dressed guests at our country club fell silent. Her parents, Robert and Margaret Thornton, nodded approvingly from their table. They probably thought I was about to deliver another one of my fawning speeches about their perfect daughter and the miracle child they'd convinced me to raise as my own. 2 years of calculated patience had led to this moment. 2 years of swallowing humiliation, recording conversations, and building a case while playing the part of the grateful, oblivious husband. You know, I continued, casually reaching for the remote control in my pocket, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. I clicked the button. The large projection screen behind me flickered to life. But I think the truth is worth so much more. The first video began to play. The room went dead silent. I could feel Liana's eyes burning into me, but I didn't look at her. Instead, I clicked to the next image. I watched as the color drained from her face. Margaret's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Robert sat frozen, his expression hardening as realization dawned. And Liana, beautiful, cunning Liana, stood paralyzed, her perfect mask crumbling before everyone who mattered in her world. I finished my toast, my voice steady and calm. Here's to every lie you fed me, and to every truth I saved for today. Then I walked toward the exit, leaving chaos erupting behind me. 2 years of planning had culminated in precisely 7 minutes and 13 seconds of revelation. The sound of Liana screaming my name as I reached the door was the sweetest music I'd ever heard. What they didn't know was that this was only the beginning. My name is Aaron Middleton. I'm an accountant from Chicago with a modest upbringing and simple dreams. I believed in honesty, hard work, and love, especially love. I'd spent my entire adult life building a foundation for those dreams, brick by careful brick. I met Liana Thornton at a charity gala where I was volunteering. She was breathtaking, tall, with chestnut hair that caught the light and eyes that seemed to see right through you. She was from Old Money, a family name attached to buildings downtown. I was the son of a factory worker who'd put himself through school. When she gave me her number that night, I couldn't believe my luck. When she agreed to marry me 2 years later, I thought I'd won the lottery of life. "You balance me," she would say, stroking my face as we lay in bed. "In a world of fakery and pretense, you're the only real thing." I cherished those words. I cherished her. I worked late nights to provide the lifestyle she was accustomed to. When her family looked down their noses at me during Christmas dinners, I smiled through it. When they made snide comments about my modest achievements, I nodded politely. Love makes fools of us all, but some fools get a rude awakening. For 3 years, we tried to have a child. Doctor's visits, fertility treatments, special diets, we did it all. I held Liana through countless nights of tears, assuring her that we would find a way, that our love was enough. Then came my diagnosis. The specialist was kind but direct. My condition meant I couldn't father children. Ever. I remember sitting in the car afterward, staring at the clinic's entrance, trying to find the words to tell Liana that I couldn't give her the one thing she wanted most. I waited weeks, researching other options, adoption agencies, anything to soften the blow. Then one evening she burst through our front door beaming. "I'm pregnant!" she cried, waving a test stick. I stood there, frozen. The impossible had happened. Or so I thought. "Liana," I said carefully, "there's something I need to tell you. I've been to a specialist. I can't have children. It's a condition I was born with." The change in her face was instantaneous. Her eyes narrowed, her smile hardened. "So now you're calling me a whore? Grow up, Aaron. Maybe you're just too stressed to perform right. Ever think of that?" She stormed off, slamming our bedroom door. Later that night, she came to me with tears and apologies, blaming hormones and the shock of my accusation. "It must be a miracle," she whispered. "Don't you believe in miracles, Aaron?" I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. But miracles don't smirk when they think you're not looking. The dinner at her parents' mansion should have been a celebration. Liana was 5 months pregnant, glowing in an expensive maternity dress. I was playing my part, the proud, if slightly bewildered, father-to-be. Then Robert clinked his crystal glass with a silver spoon. "A toast," he announced, his gaze sliding over to me. "To Aaron, who clearly doesn't know as much about biology as he thinks." Nervous laughter rippled around the table. "Not all men shoot blanks and raise someone else's kid," he continued, swirling his wine. "You're a rare breed, son." Margaret touched her perfectly coiffed hair and smiled thinly. "She settled for you out of pity. You should be grateful she still sleeps beside you." Even her younger brother Thomas chimed in. "At least now there's one man in the house with working equipment." I felt the blood drain from my face as everyone laughed. Everyone except Liana's cousin Emily, who looked at her plate in discomfort. Liana herself gave me a quick glance before joining in the laughter, her hand on her belly. I smiled politely and raised my glass. "To family," I said, the word bitter on my tongue. That night, as Liana slept soundly beside me, I stared at the ceiling, replaying the dinner in my mind. They all knew. They were laughing at me. The dutiful husband, raising another man's child while the wife and her entire family mocked him behind his back, and increasingly, to his face. Something inside me shifted that night, not with a crack or a bang, but with a quiet slide, like a glacier calving off a mountainside, silent but irrevocable. I got out of bed and went to my home office. I opened my laptop and ordered my first hidden camera. Over the next months, I became a different man. On the surface, I remained attentive, excited about the baby, the perfect husband. But beneath that mask, I was meticulously documenting every betrayal. The discreet audio recorders I planted around our house caught Liana on the phone with friends, laughing about how she'd trapped me. "He's completely clueless," she told her friend Cassandra 3 weeks before the birth. "Richard is freaking out a little, but I told him as long as Aaron thinks it's his, we're fine." Richard, her boss, the married father of 2 who had spoken at our wedding about the sanctity of marriage. I hired a private investigator who photographed their lunchtime rendezvous at a hotel downtown. I recovered deleted texts from our cloud backup. Richard. What if he figures it out? Liana. Aaron? He's like a rescue dog, grateful for scraps and too dumb to bark. When our daughter Emma was born, I played my part. I cut the cord. I cried appropriate tears. I posted proud father pictures on social media. And the day after we brought her home, while Liana napped, I swabbed the inside of Emma's cheek and sent the DNA sample to a lab, along with my own. The results came back a week later. 0% probability of paternity. I filed the report away with my growing collection of evidence. I was no longer acting on emotion. I was building a case, piece by methodical piece. For 2 years, I documented everything. The affair continued, though less frequently. Her parents' tax fraud came to light during a Sunday dinner when Robert drunkenly boasted about how he'd outsmarted those IRS bastards again. I recorded Liana's misconduct at work. She'd been funneling clients to Richard in exchange for favorable treatment, breaking company policy and possibly the law. All the while, I doted on Emma. Despite everything, I loved that little girl who smiled my smile back at me. She wasn't mine by blood, but for 2 years, she was mine in every way that mattered. That made what I had to do even harder. But sometimes, the only way to heal is to cut out the infection completely. The breaking point came on my birthday. Liana had forgotten, of course. I came home to find her on the phone with Richard, giggling about weekend plans while Emma played at her feet. "I'll tell Aaron I have a conference," she was saying. "He never checks. God, I need this weekend. Playing house with him is exhausting." I stood in the doorway, briefcase in hand, watching my wife plan her infidelity while my daughter, not my daughter, stacked blocks on our living room floor. In that moment, clarity washed over me. This would never change. The disrespect, the betrayal, the mockery, it would continue as long as I allowed it. I was enabling my own humiliation. That night, I began to plan my endgame. Timing was crucial. I needed maximum impact with witnesses who mattered to Liana. Her social standing was everything to her. Her reputation at work, her status among friends, her position in her family, these were the pillars of her identity. I would remove them all at once. Emma's second birthday provided the perfect opportunity. Liana had been planning an extravagant party at the country club for months. Everyone would be there. Her parents, her brother, colleagues from her firm including Richard, friends from their social circle. I volunteered to handle the audio-visual setup for the celebration, insisting that I wanted to create a special slideshow of Emma's first 2 years. Liana was delighted by my initiative. "Finally showing some backbone," she said, patting my cheek condescendingly. If she only knew. I spent weeks editing my recordings, selecting the most damning clips, the most explicit text messages, the clearest evidence of the affair, the fraud, the mockery. I prepared documents, the paternity test, financial records showing Liana's parents' tax evasion, evidence of workplace misconduct. I consulted with lawyers about my rights and options. I filed for divorce quietly, timing the papers to be served immediately after the party. I liquidated our joint accounts and secured my personal assets. I documented the affair thoroughly for the divorce proceedings. Most painfully, I began the process of removing myself legally from Emma's life. She wasn't my blood, and Liana had made it clear through her actions that she'd never truly been mine to raise. The kindest thing I could do was make a clean break before she was old enough to remember me. The night before the party, I sat in Emma's room watching her sleep, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the way her eyelashes fanned across her skin. I whispered an apology she would never remember and a goodbye she would never understand. Then I steeled myself for what would come next. The country club ballroom was decorated in pink and gold, with floating balloons and a 3-tier cake that probably cost more than my first car. Liana wore a designer dress and worked the room like the socialite she was, accepting compliments on Emma's behalf. Her parents held court near the bar, Robert loudly discussing his latest business acquisition, while Margaret critiqued the catering staff. Richard had brought his wife and children, keeping a respectful distance from Liana while sneaking glances when he thought no one was looking. I moved through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting backslaps from men who had mocked me behind my back, air kisses from women who had tittered at Liana's stories about her fool of a husband. When it came time for the toasts, Liana looked surprised when I approached the microphone. I wasn't known for public speaking, especially at her events. "I'd like to say a few words," I announced, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. The room quieted. Liana gave me an uncertain smile. "2 years ago, my life changed forever," I began. "They say becoming a father transforms you. They don't tell you how much." Approving nods from the parents in the crowd. "I've learned a lot in these 2 years. About family, about loyalty." I paused. "About truth." I lifted my champagne glass. "To family and to truth, because the truth has a way of setting the right people free." With one click of the remote in my pocket, the large screen behind me came to life. I didn't turn to watch. I didn't need to. I'd memorized every clip, every word, every gasp that would follow. First came Liana in our bedroom with Cassandra, laughing about me. The room fell silent. "Aaron? He's like a rescue dog, grateful for scraps and too dumb to bark. He actually believes this baby is his miracle. Can you imagine?" Then her parents at that fateful dinner. Not all men shoot blanks and raise someone else's kid. You're a rare breed, son. She settled for you out of pity. You should be grateful she still sleeps beside you." Text messages between Liana and Richard appeared on screen, graphic details of their encounters, plans for weekends away, mockery of his wife, mockery of me. Then came the workplace misconduct, emails showing how they'd diverted clients, manipulated accounts, broken company policy for their personal benefit. Robert and Margaret's tax fraud was next, their own words condemning them as they boasted about hiding assets and lying to the IRS. Finally, the paternity test results filled the screen. 0% probability. Through it all, I stood calmly at the microphone, watching the faces in the crowd. Shock, horror, embarrassment, rage. Richard's wife stood up abruptly, slapping him hard across the face before grabbing her children and storming out. Margaret collapsed into a chair, hand over her mouth. Robert turned purple with rage, lunging toward me only to be restrained by Thomas. And Liana, my beautiful, treacherous Liana, stood frozen in the center of the room as her carefully constructed world imploded around her. As the final slide faded, I raised my glass once more. Here's to every lie you fed me, and to every truth I saved for today. I set down my untouched champagne and walked calmly to the exit, ignoring Liana's screams behind me, the chaos of raised voices, shattering glass, and shocked exclamations. In the parking lot, I removed my wedding ring and dropped it into a storm drain. Then I drove away without looking back. The fallout was swift and absolute. By 9 o'clock the next morning, Liana had been fired. Her company's ethics committee didn't need much deliberation after seeing evidence of her relationship with Richard and their client manipulation schemes. Richard was also terminated, his corner office emptied by security while he pleaded for his job. Richard's wife filed for divorce by noon, citing the video evidence and requesting full custody of their children. His reputation in the business community, built over 20 years, evaporated overnight. Robert and Margaret Thornton received a notice from the IRS by the end of the week. The anonymous tip I'd sent, complete with dates, amounts, and methods of their tax evasion, had caught the agency's attention. Their assets were frozen pending investigation. As for the social fallout, it was more devastating than any financial penalty. The Thorntons were blacklisted from the very clubs and circles they'd once dominated. Invitations dried up. Calls went unreturned. The whispers and pointing began whenever they appeared in public. Liana found herself suddenly alone. Her friends, the same ones who had laughed at her stories about me, now avoided her calls. The women who had envied her lifestyle now gossiped about her downfall with barely concealed delight. She tried to reach me, of course. Hundreds of calls, texts, emails, ranging from rage to pleading to threats. I never responded to a single one. The divorce proceeded exactly as my lawyer had predicted. With the evidence I'd gathered, Liana had no leverage. I took the house, the majority of our assets, and left her with the debts she'd accumulated behind my back. As for Emma, I made the hardest decision of my life. I petitioned the court to have my name removed from her birth certificate and all parental rights terminated. I couldn't raise Richard's child knowing what I knew, and I couldn't punish an innocent little girl for her mother's sins by remaining a cold, resentful presence in her life. The court eventually determined that neither Liana nor Richard were fit parents after evidence of neglect and emotional manipulation came to light. Emma was placed with Richard's sister, a kind woman who had always wanted children but couldn't have them. I set up an anonymous trust fund for Emma's education, my final act as the father I had tried to be. 6 months after Emma's birthday party, I sold the house and moved to a quiet suburb across the country. I started my own accounting firm, focusing on helping small businesses. I bought a modest house with a garden. I got a dog, a rescue, ironically enough. I heard through mutual connections that Liana had moved back in with her parents, now significantly poorer and socially ostracized. Richard had lost his family, his job, and his reputation, eventually relocating to another state to escape the scandal. The Thorntons, once so proud and imperious, had been forced to sell their mansion to cover legal fees and back taxes. They now lived in a condominium, avoiding the social events they once dominated. As for me, I began to heal. Slowly, carefully, I rebuilt my life on my own terms. I dated occasionally, but took my time. Trust doesn't come easily after it's been so thoroughly shattered. 3 years after Emma's birthday party, I received a letter from Richard's sister. It contained a picture of Emma, now 5 years old, smiling broadly at her kindergarten graduation. On the back was a simple note. "She's happy. Thank you for the trust fund. She'll know someday that someone loved her enough to make the hardest choice." I keep that picture in my desk drawer. Not on display, that wouldn't be fair to either of us, but close enough that I can look at it when I need to remind myself that sometimes the most painful decisions are the right ones. People in my new community know parts of my story. Not everything. I'm not one to parade my wounds, but enough that they understand why I value honesty above all else. They respect me not just for surviving betrayal, but for the calculated precision with which I handled it. There's a certain peace in knowing that I took control of my narrative, that I didn't allow myself to remain a punchline in someone else's joke. Liana and her family had crafted an elaborate deception, thinking themselves clever and me a fool. But in the end, it was my quiet patience that proved most devastating. Not a heated confrontation, not a messy, emotional scene, just the systematic, meticulous unveiling of truth. Sometimes at night I sit on my porch with my dog beside me, looking at the stars, and I think about how differently things might have gone if Liana had simply been honest, if her family had shown me basic respect, if Richard had honored his own marriage vows. But then I remind myself that I'm better off now, free from lies, free from mockery, free from the exhaustion of loving someone who saw me as nothing more than a convenient prop in her life's performance. The greatest revenge wasn't the public humiliation or the financial ruin I left in my wake. It was the simple fact that I reclaimed my dignity, my self-respect, and my future, all things they never believed I had the strength to do. In the end, I didn't just survive their betrayal, I transcended it. And that is a victory they can never take away from me. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.